I grew up in the Far East mostly, in Asia. My father was a banker, and so I was a standard expatriate type kid, which meant that, you know, as a very young child, I lived in the Philippines. And then at the age of about 6 or 7, following the kind of English tradition, I was sent to English boarding school. And from there on, I lived in England, but I went out for holidays. Initially only one holiday a year, to wherever my parents happened to be, which was Philippines, Hong Kong, Japan very briefly. So I had a kind of split experience really of a very traditional English education and a life that was led to some degree in a very different part of the world, although it was a kind of expatriate's existence, which meant sort of white society amongst others. But it definitely coloured who I am.
I had a very conventional upper middle class upbringing. My dad died when I was 11, so he was also not well for much of the latter part of his life. My mother had a bit of money from a trust fund, and my uncle very kindly paid for my school fees.
He's very English in his background, and he's very kind of English A kind of background. He comes from a very privileged background. He's very, very, very bright, and he's fantastically well educated.
So I went to boarding school. In fact, I was sent away at the age of 6, which was not that uncommon in those days. But looking at it with today's eyes, it seems quite extraordinary that any mother could send a vulnerable and sensitive young child away to boarding school at such a tender age. And I was pretty miserable and unhappy. Because even at that age, I think, like a lot of young gay men or boys, I kind of felt I didn't fit in. I didn't like the rough and tumble of team games, and I was no good at it. I was kind of a bit shy, a bit sensitive, slightly bookish, not your average rough and tumble straight kid. I didn't know what it was, but I did feel different. And that went on throughout my prep school days, which is from basically the 6 until 12. And then from 13 onwards, I was at Harrow, which is a well-known boys' boarding school just outside London.
And I was in single-sex schools. And one wasn't talking about being gay at that stage, but there was a lot of boy-on-boy action.
Age 16, I developed a duodenal ulcer. And so I was taken away from school age 16 and had to go home and recover. I then had to come back and decide what my future was going to be. And I worked for a year for a firm of estate agents, realtors. And I thought to myself, this isn't what I want to do. Took my exams again and got a place at Cambridge. And that's really when I think my life started, because it's when I started to really make friends, have a good social life, have fun.
I didn't go to university, and I started to work almost as soon as I left school. I had a sort of vague family connection to an art dealing company, picture gallery, etc. And so I started with them at a very, very lowly level. But what I'd really missed, or felt I'd really missed, is what in England, I don't know what you call it here, is a gap year, which a lot of kids take between school and university. Time to go off, wander the world, find yourself, probably smoke a lot of dope, have fun, lose your virginity, all the things that you need to do, And I felt the need to do that. So I got permission from these people I worked with to take a year away. And I did what was then called the hippie trail. And I flew to Bali in Indonesia, and I spent 6 or 7 months slowly coming back overland through all those countries, Asia, India, Nepal. And at that time, you could actually drive overland still through Afghanistan and Iran, places which you really couldn't now drive through.
I think it was really after university, by which time I was about 22, living in London properly as an independent person, living away from home, that I started to develop the courage to come out to my friends and eventually to my mother, who was rather a grande dame and very old school and very disapproving. What am I going to say to my friends was her first reaction. How am I going to tell people about this? How am I going to explain this away? What did I do wrong? All those sort of ridiculous questions.
And then the other half of that year, I spent living in Europe, mostly in Germany initially and then in France, with the objective of improving my two languages.
It was only in 1967 that homosexuality was decriminalised, which was about this time, but it was still very much frowned on, and any proselytising, as it was called, was still a criminal offence. So I remember that I was at a dinner party one evening, and one of the straight guests, male, said something like, "Well, of course, I live near this queer club. All these queers are always coming and going, dreadful people, you know, the sort of typical English sort of thing of the time." And I said, "Well, that's dreadful, isn't it? I mean, where do you live?" So gradually teased the address out of him. And of course, the next night I was down there, and my gay life began in earnest. I suddenly discovered that there was a world, an underground world in those days, of gay men, and that it was really quite an exciting place.
I actually chose to tell my father, and then I asked him to tell my mother. And I remember the first time I saw my mother after that event, she kind of looked at me and, you know, she said with her eyes, "It's fine, you know, it's okay."
I went to America, and particularly New York, in the mid-70s, when there was a big underground, particularly gay scene with some really fabulous dance clubs. And I was kind of doing business in the daytime with my suit and tie. And then come the evening after dinner, I'd change into my jeans and a t-shirt and hurry off down to the meatpacking district in the Lower East Side. And you know, we'd party till 4 or 5 in the morning. And I just thought, this is heaven. You know, this is just fantastic. I've never had so much fun in my life. And I must start something like this in London. So I came back, and it took me 2 years, but eventually I found some premises. And amazingly, the premises were on Old Bond Street, which is one of the best known streets in the whole of London, right on the corner of Piccadilly. And it'd been a nightclub that my mother had known in her youth, called the Embassy Club. And I had a friend who was an American DJ, and I asked if he'd come over and be our DJ, because there was no one in England who knew how to do this sort of thing. And we put in fantastic lighting, and we created this extraordinary place.
And when I came back to England, at that period, as has kind of happened just recently, there was a big period of recession, and they didn't want me back in the gallery anymore. So it was like, glad you had a nice time away, no job. And so that took me into deciding I wanted to be an interior designer. The way I approached it was to basically start at very, very sort of low-grade type jobs, vaguely in that sort of area. And then gradually I got better jobs and better jobs. And then I subsequently started my own interior design business, which I had for 12 years or so, something like that. And I would say that artistically I was very successful, and that what I was doing was very good. I started to design one-off pieces of furniture that were very, very beautifully crafted objects that were often made by 2 or 3 other people. You know, they would be like the metalwork by one person, the lacquer by another. All one-off pieces that were collected by individual people. In total, I designed and had made about 140 pieces.
I actually met Derek a year before I opened the Embassy Club.
We were actually introduced by an American friend of ours,
who was a society person, but also liked cute boys, and he used to give very interesting lunches, and there would always be some cute people there and some interesting people there. I think I was the interesting and Derek was the cute.
We liked each other, but there was no love going on. And so in the way that kind of gay people are, you jump on the person when you meet them, and then you maybe continue to see them or you don't see them. So we did, but we continued to see other people.
And then a year later, I'd opened the Embassy Club. It was about 6 months into the club. I was completely exhausted. And a friend of mine said, hey, a friend's lent me a flat in Cannes for the weekend. Why don't we go and you can have a complete rest and you take someone along with you if you'd like. So I said, fine.
And he jockeyed between inviting me and inviting 2 or 3 other people. So it was not like it was going to be me.
Thank God I chose Derek.
We had presumed it would just be a fun weekend. But somehow, something happened during that weekend.
And love happened.
And by the end of that weekend, it seemed to us that we would want to live with each other for the rest of our lives.
And that for 2 years, we were just living on cloud nine and making money too, lots of it. So that was kind of fun too.
So I did a small amount of interior design work for them at the Embassy Club. And then the next big venture was a big club called Heaven.
Heaven opened in December 1979. And really throughout the 70s, the club scene of any sort in London was dire in the extreme. I mean, I have to be honest, I started Heaven because I thought I would make a lot of money owning such a club. But it was also a passion, and because, you know, I knew how difficult it was for young gay men, particularly at that time, to have a space where they felt unthreatened, where they could express their sexuality and actually celebrate their sexuality. But after 5 years of that, you know, Derek and I really had enough. And Derek had a day job. You know, it was difficult for him because he had to go to work as an interior designer at 9 in the morning. And we tended to be up until 2 or 3 in the morning. Well, you can't keep that going forever. So something had to give, and we decided that, you know, we'd done the club business, we'd do something else. And along came Richard Branson, and he made me a reasonable offer. So he bought Heaven.
I took the decision to end my career as an interior designer. And it was a big decision to make, because I think for a lot of us, you kind of value yourself by who you are. So anyhow, I stopped being an interior designer. And Jeremy, who's been far, far cleverer than I, who's been the one who's really steered our ship as a couple, and he's been the kind of initiator, and frankly, he's been the one who's known how to make money. Well, we had a lot of things going business-wise, and I had started to feel that this was something I needed to give more attention to learn more about, to participate in.
After I'd sold Heaven, I had a bit of money in my pocket, which is a nice start. And one of the first things we did was to buy some property, and using Derek's skills as an interior designer and the bit of money that I had, and also I think my imagination, because I have a feel for property, we bought some derelict property, and we actually built a house for ourselves in the centre of London, which was rather remarkable. So that was one of the first things we did. And then after that, I thought to myself, well, I've got a bit of cash, but I don't have an income. So what am I going to do next? Well, I embarked on a series of ventures. Some of them weren't quite as profitable as others. And I opened a business selling fresh pasta and cheese called Pasta Pasta, which got huge amounts of publicity and was a great success in most people's eyes, but never made any money. And very soon the supermarket started selling fresh pasta and sauces, and that put us out of business. So I had my first experience of a business going bankrupt, and that is not a nice experience. So I was rather chastened after that experience, and I decided to go into the gym business. So we found this building in Covent Garden, which was a big old fruit and vegetable warehouse.
We gave it a sort of look, obviously, and a sort of the birth of a sort of brand image.
And that gym worked really well.
And that, with every new gym, we've continued to develop.
And that's the beginning of Soho gyms, largely a gay gym. But as we've expanded into more gyms, they become less and less gay and more mixed.
Now we've got to a stage where we work with a team of architects who are largely responsible for this, but I still play a very close role, now more as a sort of informed client rather than as a participating designer in how they look.
We now have 6 gyms, all in the centre of London. Derek did a great job and created some very avant-garde interiors for their time. They were fantastic.
I mean, it was very fortunate that I had a professional skill which Jeremy didn't have, which allowed me to make some, real contribution to what he was up to, as opposed to just being on the side, as in a support role, And it was great for me. I mean, it gave me the opportunity to do a whole load of jobs that I never would have had the opportunity to do. To make a huge major nightclub in the middle of London was a fantastic challenge. And to do the same with the gym group, those have been great opportunities that I never would have had. So, it's worked very well in both directions. My main sort of contribution has been this small charity we started, AIDS ARC.
We originally started in South Africa because we knew people there and it was a place that we liked to go.
And to date, we either have helped or are currently helping a total of about 750, 760 people. My main sort of contribution in a sort of yogic sense has been this small charity we started, AIDS ARC.
We originally started in South Africa because we knew people there and it was a place that we liked to go. And in those days, the government, for some extraordinary reason, which I will never understand, actually banned the import of many classes of antiretroviral. They were in total denial from the top down. Through the pharmacy we bought the drugs from in Lesotho to an excellent local Sotho woman doctor. And working with her, we were able to finance the drugs for her to enable her to set up the first ever AIDS clinic in Lesotho. In the meanwhile, found a charity working in India, which is a country that we both like to visit, but Derek in particular likes to visit. And through this charity, we met one of their doctors, and he was the most saintly, wonderful person. And we're still working with him today. And every time I see him, I want to hug him. He's just the most lovely person.
And to date, we either have helped or are currently helping a total of about 750, 760 people. And those are people who, without our intervention, without our contribution, and without the intervention of the other doctors who are working with them, would be dead. And they're people who we know, who we've met, who we've sat down with.
It really is just Derek and I have to say most of the hard work is done by Derek because we have a division of labour and that's kind of his area and he's very passionate about it. He also travels more than I do to a lot of the places where we are doing work to see the projects and to assess them.
We're on our way to see two special friends of AIDS ARC. Benzman lost his parents to AIDS and was born HIV positive. Despite a damaged immune system, he fought off innumerable infections and on many occasions nearly died. Only his grandmother, Chandrama, cared for him. His other family and neighbours thought him cursed and shunned him. Happily, at the age of 7, this little boy found free medical treatment through FXB and ARVs funded by AIDS ARC. Immediately, his life and health were transformed. He got so much better so fast that the people in his community thought a god had cured him. Now they honour and cherish him. Now he is active, healthy and attending school. I'm very happy to be seeing Benzman and his granny again. How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you, huh? Thank you. Okay, let's see. Let me do it for you. How many? One, two? Only one. Look, Benjamin. Yeah? Bye-bye. See you again soon.
His current status is CD4 has gone up from 91 cells to 697 cells. Now he regained his health. There are no infections and they are very, very grateful to AIDS ARC and FXB.
AIDS ARC has been supporting our HIV positive beneficiaries. Their lives have been saved. They're all leading a very healthy life. but there are many more who desperately needs help.
To know you can save someone's life, and you could sit with them and their family and say they have a daughter there, and you know that that child would have no parent, and you've done something which has prevented that. It's a very big feeling, and it's a very wonderful opportunity that's given me to access people like that, you know, whose lives I would never ever connect to, you know? So for me, it's been an amazing privilege, you know, because I know people like that, and they know me. And, you know, we've had a kind of exchange which is powerful and life-changing. And so I'm very privileged, and that work continues, and it's great.
I really thought, wouldn't it be great to take the boat to northern waters where the bird life is abundant?
I'd done a certain amount of research on artists that worked up and down the coast. And, you know, we went and knocked on a lot of doors and said, "Hi, can we come and talk to you?"
I said to him once that, you know, if I'd taken your advice, Derek, I never would have done anything.
Well, Chasing Spring is a romantic journey, really, a romantic expedition up, you know, the beautiful shoreline of our country, the United Kingdom, at a most magic and perfect time of the year.
And we charter this boat, Killarney, very beautiful boat, in the Mediterranean every year. But what I miss there is a lot of the wildlife. There are not that many fish, and there are very few birds, and I love nature. And I really thought, wouldn't it be great to take the boat to northern waters where the bird life is abundant? So that was the first seeds of the idea. We're talking about maybe 40 days.
To get
spring to get from the Scilly Isles up to the tip of northern tip of
It's a very
Cape
romantic
Royal.
notion, isn't it?
It's a very romantic notion, and spring is the most special time. It's the golden time. It's the time when everything is
everything's
new
starting.
and everything comes to life. It's a rebirth.
Yeah.
It's the annual rebirth of everything. Well, about 3 years ago, I think the idea came to me. I've always been fascinated by the Western Isles of Scotland and feel I've never spent enough time there or seen enough of them. And then I heard on the radio someone saying that spring travels north at the pace of a walking man. And that fired my imagination. I thought, that's really something. Wouldn't it be great to follow spring? But let's do it by boat.
There's enough bloody cases.
Derek is always joking, that I said to him once that, if I'd taken your advice, Derek, I never would have done anything. And there's a certain amount of truth because he is the cautious one. The one who says, hey, maybe we should hold back on this, or, actually I'm very comfortable where I am at the moment. I don't want to break out and do this new, risky, mad venture. And I'm the one who says, come on, just give it a try.
Was I keen on the trip? For me, I tend to see all the negatives for doing a lot of things, and the boat was a very long way away. And also, I really like being in hot water. And the water up there is cold. So I saw that it was a long way to take the boat, and I saw also that it was going to be an environment which was very different from the one I was familiar with. So my natural reaction is like, oh no, let's not But my nature is that once I'm involved in a challenge, that I embrace it wholeheartedly and become a huge participant in it and hopefully contribute to it. So we joined the boat right in the very southernmost part of England, at the tip of Cornwall at Land's End, or near Land's End, a place called Mousehole. Hi Mousehole, bye Rose.
Well, today is Wednesday the 15th of April and we're just leaving Mosul on a beautiful sunny day, as you can see.
We climbed on the boat and then for 2.5 months or so we tried to keep pace of spring as it moved north. Well, the crew is Tim Bliss, Captain Tim Bliss, who's been captain of the boat, I think, for 12 years or so. And he's a real sort of boat person. His parents were boat gypsies. He was raised on a boat.
Up until 3 years ago, I'd spent my whole life living on a boat. I've now bought an apartment in Malta, back home. I've had that for 4 years, and that's the longest time I've lived on land that I can remember in my adult life. Well, I grew up on a Scottish fishing boat, a converted one, since the age of 6 in Malta, with my brother and my sister. 5 of us lived on board, and pretty much the same as yourself. I was 5, 6 years old when we moved onto the boat. And everything to do with the water. We cruised around the Med, we cruised everywhere in the family home, that's what we did. Sailing Mirror 10s, you do everything connected with the water, don't you?
Yeah.
And I never really thought, I just kind of ended up on a boat, you know, and you just end up on the sea and always having a horizon is a lovely thing to have, a luxury to have.
Number 2 is a delightful comedian and a highly skilled man who we're very fond of, who comes originally from, well, he is Bulgarian.
There is a rocks down below. What does it mean? It means that we might caught a rock and we might have a nice time lifting the anchor. That's what it means. So far so good. 20 meters.
But he also has lived in Malta for a number of years. He's been associated with the boat for about 4 or 5 years. And then we had 2 others, one who was the chef and the other who was the steward, who were newly involved in the boat, but who certainly were characters who shared the voyage with us.
Oh my god! You're brave. I wouldn't do that. The whole world's gonna be on TV.
Where's it gone?
How do you feel?
It's disappeared. You're just going in now? Wait.
Oh god. Oh my god, for real.
Jesus Christ.
And I'm the nature boy. I like to get out there with the wet and wild and the birds and the bees and look at the birds nesting and see the flowers blooming. Yeah, this very coarse grass stabilises the dune and allows other plants to then colonise the stable dune system. And again, the roots of these sort of plants again help to stabilise and build a natural colony of plants. Now, if you watch very carefully, you'll see little holes in the dune. Those holes are made by solitary bees, and you'll see them in a moment visiting. There's one coming along his hole. It's amazing what you will see if you just wait and watch.
We wanted to remind ourselves about how beautiful it is in our own backyard, and indeed it is, and we saw it in a most beautiful way at a most beautiful time of year.
It's pretty windy most of the time, but we've got it on a perfect day.
Look at the windbreaks they have for the cultivated flowers.
Though Derek, I have to say, of the two of us is more of a gardener. So when it came to...
Yeah, I'm a nature boy now. Jeremy says
Yes,
before I
you
knew
are.
him, like I never would even like go, oh, mud, you know, forget it. You know, that I was a real city boy. And of course it's completely untrue, but I've learned a great deal since.
I mean, how incredible to have this view.
Isn't it lovely?
May we ask how long have you been here on St Martin's?
I've been here 53 years. I was born in Essex and grew up in Lancashire.
And then came here 50
And came
odd
here
years.
on holiday.
But I mean, that's so beautiful, isn't it?
Looks like a sort of Aris gladioli family.
Spraxia.
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 Well, that's worth knowing about, isn't it?
Who's the main gardener around here?
Well, it's obvious that it's Mrs.
I'm the gardener, but Rodney is the grass cutter and the heaver around and the chopper back and the digger out and all that,
very
you know, all the
brains
things.
and broad.
Wish I had one of those.
Our own country is particularly dear to me, and I also know a bit about the wildlife of our shores. So it's a natural, really, to make a journey of some sort in UK waters. Kind of like shearwaters, because they have very long, straight wings, and they glide a lot.
And that bony thing makes them look like an Israelite, is what they...
Yeah, it actually means that they're a member of the petrel family. They're not a gull, they're a petrel. Oh look, shag nesting up there.
That's what I wanted to show you.
Oh yeah, that's...
We're looking at a shag on his nest, or her nest, and you can notice a bit of yellow around the bill, bright yellow, and also the iridescent oily green of the plumage when you see it close to. And if the light's on it, it reflects just like oil does on the surface of water. And that's a common cormorant-like bird that dives for fish.
So if there's a kind of message there, it's, you know, stay in your own place, get still, surround yourself by fine things and beautiful things, and really absorb them and learn to get close to them and to love them.
The thing about broom, which is a rather interesting fact, not known to many people, is the Latin name for broom, or the old-fashioned Latin name for broom, the genuine Roman name, was genista. And in the Middle Ages, it became the badge of the Plantagenets, Planta Genista.
When you've been with someone as long as we've been with each other, 30-odd years, you've educated each other.
And Derek wanted to interview artists because he's an artist, and that's his primary interest.
I'd done a certain amount of research on artists that worked up and down the coast. And, you know, we went and knocked on a lot of doors and said, hi, can we come and talk to you?
Yes, I'm building a landscape. I'm actually making something.
Yeah, like a model almost.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm
3D
bringing
kind of
something out of a canvas.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
start at the back with the sky and I build it.
Always from the sky.
Well, always from the back. I mean, some of them don't have skies.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You start from the furthest distance.
Yeah, and I bring it forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One of my favourite people that we met was a wonderful and slightly eccentric lady called Lottie Glob. And Lottie Glob turned out to be a rather well-known, sort of internationally well-known ceramicist. And she has the sort of wonderful hands that a potter might have. You know, great big gnarled, strong, big, powerful hands that are used to taking earth and forming it into objects.
These are the floating stones. I have got 333 floating out in the hollow. The hollow. Yeah.
She makes ceramics which are able to float. Beautiful, beautiful glazed objects. And she purposely had removed herself from the urban world, you know, civilization, too much contact with people, to a very, very remote place.
When I come down from the hills, I'm always bringing some material with me, like clay and rocks and so on. And
you put rocks in the books?
I make the pages, and it's got my drawings and my little notes, written notes in it. And seal it all up and I fire it and melt it together in the kiln.
Is there some symbolism attached to that idea?
You know, I never planned anything, it just happens.
Yeah, right.
And but yes, I think there's some symbolism whatever I do.
It's earthenware or clay?
No, it's stoneware. Well, it's called stoneware. It's fired to very high temperature. It's fired to, I mean, it melts rocks.
Amazing. You've got things in it.
That's rocks, smaller rocks and glass and
also the mix of the clay. You've mixed the clay very roughly.
Yeah.
And is there a danger when you fire it then that these different mixes will split, or you want them to split?
I like them to split.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, if they split properly.
She was a very lovely and fabulous lady, you know.
We're just entering the fabulous Clandeboye estate, which is the home of our friend Lindy Dufferin. She's one of those people you want to hug. And those are the people I value in life, the people you want to hug.
Yes.
Really. And I mean,
in a huge hurricane of winds and rain, I mean, it was a very passionate period of painting.
right.
No, this is not just been painting, this is Paisley, you
Yes,
see.
absolutely.
what was the sitting like with Mr. Paisley? How was it?
Very difficult. What's really amusing is the tide, you see, so where it says no. It's only been one sitting, we've got another 4 to do.
And did he commission the painting? Or did you...
He asked me to do it.
So that's...
He said, you tell everybody you've had Mr. Paisley sitting for you still. And he kept explaining this, of course moving the whole time.
Yes.
While he explained it.
So he wasn't sitting still.
Oh no, it's the worst sitter you've ever seen. It was absolutely terrifying, suddenly having him there, you know, by the way.
I rather liked the son of the owner of the Crinan Hotel, who was an artist that Derek particularly interviewed.
And what then it occurred to you wanted to be an artist?
It didn't occur, it was the only subject at school that had any strength really.
Right.
And I guess I was quite interested in it, but not massively.
He had a wonderful natural charm. He had a delightful oneness with nature.
At this period I was really into the politics of fishing. It used to be a really busy fishing village here.
Right.
I mean, boats coming in and out all night, and then it's all fished out now, so there's not much happening.
There's no fish out there?
Well, there's no fishies, as in like whitefish, not really.
No.
But there used to be big for shellfish here. And before that there was lots of herring.
Right.
And
even in your day,
Yeah, I can't really remember the herring, but I remember the clam period and like the prawns.
Is that just overfishing?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Yeah.
And as an artist, as an artist rather than anything, does that upset you?
It doesn't. I like to. Yeah, I mean it's sad. I mean that we've done it so quickly. Cleaned them up. But I mean, I have friends who are fishermen, and you got to listen to both sides of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just the unlucky ones where it happened in their generation.
Complete sincerity and honesty that you don't meet very often in so-called civilized society. He just was happy with his art and pottering around on his boat and just being one with nature.
So we had 7 weeks of completely unbroken, perfect weather.
What mad sort of person did I marry? Look at him running naked along the beach.
She dressed as if she was sort of going to a very, very, very late night sort of sex club. Most of the time she was on board. Jeremy Morton and I had done a huge amount of research, and so there were a number of people we already planned to meet, particularly people from organisations up the coast who we thought might share our interests.
Basically, what you're saying is we're catching birds in a scientific manner to put a little ring on their leg, which it's like you wearing a wristwatch, but on there's inscribed a unique number and an address.
Right.
So if anybody catches it again alive, there's several ways of catching birds, or if someone finds it dead, if their cat gets it, or if it flies into a window.
Yeah.
that data goes back to the British Trust for Ornithology, who
and then it's
look
all
after the
compiled
ringing
in
scheme.
one huge database.
They compile it, and we can look at the movements of birds, also their longevity, differences between birds resident in different areas, differences in biometrics, and the way they live their lives.
Sure.
But probably, you know, we met as many people spontaneously that we just went up to and said, you know, would you mind talking to us about this, that, or the other?
We are chasing spring, and basically want to talk to people about what spring means to them and what's been happening to the catches and what you think about sort of life of the world and nature generally. What sort of fishing do you do?
We're whelk fishing at the moment.
Whelk fishing?
Yeah, we fish about 1,000 pots a day for whelks. These are the pots on the key here.
Okay. Why did you particularly hone in on whelks?
Well, we haven't got much left we can do now because we're being closed down with different markets. It just stopped us longlining, they stopped us from scalloping. Yeah. So we only really have whelks now. So if it wasn't for the whelks, we'd have been put out of business by the government very soon. Really? So we're really just down to what we can do now here.
I mean, maybe the most fun person who came on board was Jessica.
He's just got married, okay? And he's having a bit of time sorting things, you know, he needs a bit of advice on how to sort things out and kind of what a young lady likes, you know? Tell us what a young lady really likes.
Lot of sex.
Lots of sex.
That's very important.
Is that important?
Lot of sex.
What,
so you have
with
to make
different
sure
women or?
Young women. I have to be there.
Jessica is the new girlfriend of one of our closest friends. And she's not someone who I would say is at all familiar with boats or even maybe the rustic life. And her idea of kind of country shoes, you know, were kind of gold high-heel stilettos. That was about the nearest she got to kind of country shoes.
Are those your walking shoes?
Yeah.
You think they're suitable for walking?
Yeah, for me, yeah.
I think they're perfect.
Perfect.
Well, they're sort of, do you call
the collar, we need a bit of...
Do you call those country shoes?
Yeah, that's my country shoes.
Yeah, perfect. I think they're absolutely superb. Huh?
She dressed as if she was sort of going to a very, very, very late night sort of sex club. Most of the time she was on board, and she was great fun.
Okay, Jessica, I'm now going to demonstrate how to put on a life jacket. You put your head through the only hole there is to put your head. So if you put it over your head, like so, then you take this strap around your waist.
The life jacket seems to be sticking out a bit. What's all that about?
Take that round your waist. It's important to go through this loop here, and then fastened by simply pushing in and clipping there, and to tighten, pull on this line here. And round here, a whistle. To attract attention.
I don't think Jessica needs a whistle to attract attention.
She did actually really connect and understand what we were up to. That was great. We were amazingly blessed because during the period of this voyage, that part of the United Kingdom enjoyed one of the best spring summers that they've enjoyed for the last 3 or 4 decades.
What mad sort of person did I marry? Look at him running naked along the beach.
So we had about 6 or so weeks, 7 weeks of completely unbroken, perfect weather, and it was a miracle.
Go into the sea!
The other thing the trip gave us was a fantastic opportunity to be intimately with each other, which was great. You know, because although we've been with each other a great deal of time, you know, we lead busy lives and we're often surrounded by lots of people and have different responsibilities,
Running from place to place.
Running from place to place. And this was a kind of, it was an opportunity to be intimately together and share something very big together. We came up here. We were just on the bike and we saw this little sign, Castle. And then this place was here. We climbed up here. And there we go, you know. It's the most incredibly beautiful, private, ancient place, all this ancient stone. And then we were looking, just like we were looking here, over this piece of water, and then at some point we just heard this noise. That was sort of a breathing noise, and anyhow it turned out to be a pod of dolphin swimming up the loch, and we just watched this whole pod of dolphin. You know how they come onto the surface of the water and go like that, and they expel all that air, take air in? That's what we heard.
Was an opportunity to get to Scotland. We're just coming into the very sheltered harbour at Campbelltown in the Mull of Kintyre, and we'll spend tonight here and then leave tomorrow for the Isle of Arran. There's something about the Western Isles of Scotland which are unique. The other thing that also attracted me about Chasing Spring was an opportunity to get to Scotland. And I think those of your viewers that watch the series will notice that we did hurry a bit in order to get to Scotland. After 3 or 4 hours crossing from Ireland, we finally reached Scotland. We're just coming into the very sheltered harbour at Campbelltown in the Mull of Kintyre, and we'll spend tonight here and then leave tomorrow for the Isle of Arran. There's something about the Western Isles of Scotland which are unique.
Yeah, I mean, how beautiful it is, this bracken all just starting. You can see like the tiny bit of dead bracken left, and these incredibly virile, vigorous new stems of bracken, just new and fresh and completely covering here. Beautiful, just with the bluebells coming up.
Scotland is a very special place, and for me it combines delightfully eccentric people with dramatic wildlife and the most wonderful scenery. Chasing Spring captures a bit of all of that. The door has got a big stone lintel and very large stones down either side, with a little, what looks like almost a gatehouse, where there could have been 2 sets of doors, perhaps.
They are very unusual, and you only find these constructions on the northwest of Scotland. And the steps are built into the wall so that they rise, and then you get non-usable space because it's beehive shaped. And then the other thing is they think they had they use wood higher up to effectively create balcony that you can then walk around and have more usable space, because there's clearly no space up there.
The other thing, which I had in the back of my mind, was this fascination with the extraordinary archipelago of St Kilda, which was the end point of our trip. And I think that when you see the island you will understand a little of the extraordinary magic of that place and how it takes you back to Neolithic times. You feel you've gone back in time. They were the last hunter-gatherers in the British Isles. They developed an extraordinary dry stone architecture in which they built these beehives which are dotted all over the hillside. They're thatched roofs and corbelled stone, which means that one course oversails the next. And in it they stored their worldly possessions, such as they were, and their salted seabirds.
It's so prehistoric looking, isn't it? But I mean, look at the size stones they've used to create it.
They made their living by killing and collecting the young seabirds which nest in profusion on the islands, and they would catch them before they were fledged and able to fly by shinning up these sheer precipices and then lassoing them. And then they would salt them and eat them all year. Can you imagine? They lived off a diet of the occasional herring, salted seabirds that tasted fishy, and potatoes, and that was probably about it, and maybe a rye bread. And for months they were cut off from any sort of contact because the storms that far out in the Atlantic blow for weeks on end. So these strange people lived there talking their own peculiar form of Gaelic, and they were evacuated by the British government in 1930. And here we are, Journey's End. It's got a sort of eerie silence to the place. But they had the wild beauty of the place, and that must have been something.
I think the things that lay ahead, hopefully, will be bigger contributions than the contributions we've made to date, you know. And we are very passionate people. You know, we hope that programs like Chasing Spring also will serve to inspire people.
Gosh, I think it was so varied. One moment we were visiting archaeological sites, then historic castles, then artists, then friends, talking to fishermen, talking to people who'd worked on lighthouses, looking at nature, looking at birds, looking at the trees coming into blossom. And each one of those moments was golden. To look at nature in all its glory is to be at one with the world. That should be a lesson to us all.